Hey, thank you for your discussion of how you plan your units. We'd like to close this program with some questions and answers about IPAs in general. And the first one is, how would you describe an IPA to someone who had never heard the term and asked you, what is an IPA?
I think it's as she explained, it's a change in teaching methodology. Mm-hmm. So it gives you an organized way to put together different parts that any teacher will probably think of, but it gives you a guideline on how to organize these different parts that mm-hmm. Fatima was talking about. Mm-hmm. And therefore it's extremely useful because it gives you a point where to start in changing probably what you've been doing before, bringing the advantage of guiding the instructor, the teacher through this process with precise guidelines, which also leave you space for your own ideas and for what you want to give more emphasis to. And it results then in a constructive way to propose to students what any instructor probably had in mind, but just didn't know how to put into practice.
So if I understand you correctly, it's more than just an assessment. It's a whole philosophy, a way of organizing your instruction.
Yes, that's what I mean. It's it's to organize. It's a different way to organize your teaching. Not related anymore to what a textbook is and what says, for example, the typical division into chapters, but related more to different topics that you may want to analyze during the school year or semester according to your school setting, and that allows you, of course, to organize this topic in a systematic way. Considering that each topic, which may consist in a unit, will follow you can make connection among them, and so carry out the whole program, not relying exclusively on a textbook and on chapters.
I mean, it's really helpful for teachers because it's just a very clear-cut model, if we can call it, better than philosophy. But I think that IPAs is really helpful for teachers as well as for students.
And it is definitely more meaningful, as we talked about before. So you see, you learn through themes and everything. So the same theme is seen from different perspectives, but it's always the same theme. So it's developed more naturally, and so that learning occurs more naturally and more meaningful.
Yeah, and there is some identity, like I can see that with the IPAs that Diana was talking about. She was teaching her students. She's teaching Spanish. She was teaching them how to go to a market and buy food, and it was pretty much the same thing I was doing. We didn't talk about it. We didn't plan it. But because we are following the same model, we end up having the same activities, and it was kind of weird to me. Wow, she's talking about bargaining. She's talking about there is different way of selling and buying in different countries. So this makes teaching all the languages the same, pretty much. And that's what makes the IPAs great. I mean, they kind of make us like unity of world language teachers, and they can just check. I can just check her unit. I can use it for myself because we are pretty much doing the same thing. We just have to change the language and the culture.
As I was saying earlier to Ursula, what has been so exciting for me in these conversations is that we have pre-K elementary with middle school with university instructors, and you're all able to talk to each other about teaching language and unit planning and themes, and there's not a disconnect between university and elementary. I think it's a little bit of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
We talk about that word articulation all the time, but perhaps this is a way to really make articulation real for language teachers.
Yeah.
Cross levels and across languages, as you said.
Yeah.
And also it allows to develop abilities that they are not strictly related to language. So if you ask your student to make a presentation, this is an ability that they certainly can use in the Italian or Arabic or Chinese language, but those skills are useful for any other discipline in which they will have to present. So again, it's not, as Fatima was saying, only a language, but it's more of a broader way of learning, because you add things that the student can also apply in other fields, not only the linguistic.
Would you ever teach a unit for your language classes that didn't integrate the 3 modes of communication?
I don't think so. Yeah, because they are related to each other. We can't teach listening and forget about communication and reading and comprehensibility. I mean, we can't teach one and not the other. They are all together.
To say that we used to do that because we taught a lot without the IPA. But definitely getting to know IPA and getting to use IPA, it reveals number of different advantages that really can't be ignored.
So it's a great tool for language teachers.
Often teachers ask how many units a year they should plan to teach if they teach with the IPA as a model. What would be your recommendation to them?
As far as the university setting, which is divided into semesters, we thought that probably per semester 4 units would be enough to cover, would be enough, because we saw that developing an IPA of about 2 weeks or 2 weeks and a half, and so counting, it would work pretty well in how we can carry on the various topics. So it's not a matter of quantity, it's more of a matter of quality. And so how you can, so maybe in fewer, you can obtain more results.
Yeah. And we all know that developing IPAs is not easy. It's a very time-consuming process and very challenging for different reasons that we talked about.
And it also depends on the level. I mean, if you have level 1, then your student requires more, instruction, more effort, so that they can really process the information. But if they are level 2, then they have all the basic, or level 3, 4, they have all the basic information or vocabulary. Then you don't need to put all the time. Then you can make even more IPAs. The same IPAs, I can use the same IPAs for my first year and second year, but the second ones are going to be more elaborated and more expanding on other topics, probably. But they can still be food, because we cannot stop having units on food. But instead of just focusing on basic things, we can go and expand on bigger, like nutrition, do we eat what we should eat, and etc.
And also for different teaching settings, there could be syllabus constraints, textbook constraints. So we also, in some environment, we also want to balance the two things. And we saw that we can use both textbook and units.
I'd like you to talk just a little more about that, because that was exactly my next question to you is, so what happens to my textbook if my school says I have to use a textbook, or my parents say I have to use a textbook? Can I teach with IPAs then?
I believe so. It all, what we need to do is, for some things, for example, the theme, every chapter in a book deals with themes or with topics. And from there, we want to have some goals and then develop the IPA, so we can, in this way, we can integrate the two things and make it more meaningful for the students, not like, okay, today we do the book and tomorrow we do the IPA, which wouldn't make any sense.
I think it can be used as a summative assessment. So if you have a textbook, you can decide, for example, in terms of final exam, which has been the more traditional way to go in college setting, have the IPA replace what the traditional written exam was, and so which complete your academic year. That could be a way to go, and at the same time keep the textbook, if that's a requirement, which in many cases is.
How do you know that IPAs work?
It engages students, and it shows them that they can actually accomplish something. And receiving this constant feedback also increases their confidence and their conviction that they can do something with the language.
Yeah, I think the key is the real life task. The moment you give a student a task which they know they can apply in the real world, the attitude changes immediately, and so that also outside of the IPA. So I don't see why it shouldn't work when it is inserted, it is enclosed and included in a more systematic plan.